to a special holiday edition of Spicy Kitchen Time. Today we're going to be making a very easy, no-knead cinnamon raisin bread that'll make you the star of your Christmas breakfast. So let's get started and show you what the ingredients are. They're quite simple. I always like to use bread flour when making bread, but all-purpose will work here. We've also got 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of yeast, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and 1.5 tablespoons of salt, along with rum-soaked raisins, and we'll get back to that in a minute. So, I've already pre-measured the flour. All the measurements will be in the description below. It's 375 grams of flour or 3 cups. I always recommend being as precise as possible when you're baking, so it's a good idea to invest in a digital kitchen scale. So we've got here in our bowl 375 grams of flour. To that, we're going to add the yeast. If you could come a little bit closer and show the people what we're doing. Here we go, great. And then we've got our 2 tablespoons of sugar. And you want to keep the sugar and salt on a different side from the yeast. You don't want that salt to have direct contact with the yeast because sometimes it can kill it. So we'll put the salt over here. And then our 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Now, I've mixed 3/4 of a cup of water and 3/4 of a cup of whole milk. Always use whole milk when you're cooking. Just mix them together and make sure that they're slightly warm, probably around 90 to 100 degrees. That gives a chance for the yeast to bloom well. So what we'll do is we're gonna go ahead, we've got our dry ingredients all put together. Let's whisk those up so that they're nicely combined. Could not be easier. And to that, we'll go ahead and add our milk and water. And just pour that all in there. It's a very wet dough, but we're not going to need to put this in the mixer. We can do this all by hand. Just go around the outside. Make sure that your ingredients are nicely combined. And right about here is where I'm going to add the rum-soaked raisins. Rum-soaked raisins, the reason we want to use these is because you see they're nice and moist and plump, not dried like when they come right out of the box. Also adds a nice little flavor. Making rum-soaked raisins is very simple. Just put your raisins into a glass or Tupperware container like this, cover with your choice of rum, and seal. They don't need to be refrigerated. The raisins will absorb the rum, it'll make them nice and plump and juicy, and add that extra flavor. So for this recipe, we're gonna be using 3/4 of a cup of the rum-soaked raisins. Let's go ahead and put them in there. And then we'll dump them in our bowl and finish combining our dough. Go ahead and Okay, so once you've mixed up your dough, cover it with a saran wrap and let it sit for 12 to 15 hours on the counter, not in the fridge. And what's gonna happen is that gluten is going to be activated. You can see here that the yeast is alive. This is what it'll look like. The nice strands of gluten have formed. This is after sitting out for 12 or 15 hours. And you see we have a nice stretchy dough. And what we're going to do is take this out and put it onto a floured work surface. Make sure that your work surface is clean. Another side note, if you don't like raisins, and sometimes some people don't, you can also use dried cranberries. If you're gonna soak the dried cranberries, I recommend soaking them in Grand Marnier. It's gonna give it a much more complex flavor, and it goes better. The rum tends to go better with the raisins. The Grand Marnier tends to go better with the raisins. Okay, so we've got our dough. And what we're gonna do is really simple. Again, we haven't done any kneading. We've let nature do its work for us. We're just gonna fold it over a bit, like this. A little stretch and fold. And then into a nice ball shape like this. It's going to be a very loose, wet dough, and we want that. Add a little bit more flour. And then we're going to put that onto a piece of parchment, cover it with a towel, and let it sit for about an hour to an hour and a half. Cut. Okay, so it's been an hour. Our bread is ready to put in the oven. You'll see that it's kind of collapsed a bit, and that's exactly what we want. So what we want to do now is we've preheated our oven to 400 degrees, and actually you might want to have it preheated and leave it heated for about an hour so that that oven really builds up a nice heat. So what we're going to do is make a little slice. I can't find my razor blade, so we're going to make a little slice here on the bread. You can do a number of different designs if you like. This is the way that I like to do it. Just 3 little cuts, like a U shape. And then we're gonna go ahead and pop it into a 400 degree oven. Oh. There we go. And we'll let it stay in there for 45 to 50 minutes, and then it'll be ready. So, our bread's been baking for 50 minutes. We took it out, put it on a cooling rack to cool for 20 to 25 minutes. And as you can see, here's the finished product. So the quick way to tell if your bread's done is to tap it and it has a hollow sound. So we're gonna slice it right down the middle. It's still nice and warm. Listen to that. Whoops. And here's the finished product. Still steaming and warm. Look at that nice bounce. A good crumb. The raisins are nice and plump and juicy, packed with flavor. A little bit of warm butter, and you're off to the races on your Christmas morning. So stay tuned for episode 2 of Spicy Kitchen's holiday special, where we're going to be making homemade, genuine eggnog. Thanks so much. Bye.